It was the kind of evening that stretched on endlessly, where even the minutes seemed to echo with uncertainty. I sat cross-legged in the neighbor's yard, hidden behind the dense hedgerow, my breath blending with the crisp autumn air. The faint glow from our bedroom window framed my wife, Lily, as she moved through the room with an air of thoughtless ease. Her silhouette flitted between the curtains, pausing occasionally, her hands busied with some unseen task. I should have felt ridiculous sitting here, my body stiff from the cold ground, and my mind taut with the strain of suspicion. Instead, I was hyper-alert. Every motion, every flicker of light held my gaze, even though a part of me wished to see nothing. 4 days now, I had noticed the subtle shifts in her demeanor. Her guarded phone calls, the scent of unfamiliar cologne that clung to the air like a ghost, and the way she rushed to switch her phone screen whenever I walked into the room. These things were nothing, perhaps, but they were everything too. Inside, she sat at the edge of the bed now, her phone pressed to her ear. I could see the faint illumination of its screen, and even from this distance, I could tell her body was tense, her voice low. My stomach churned as her lips curled into a hesitant smile, one I hadn't seen directed at me for weeks. This wasn't normal, and yet she moved as if it was. For the past hour, I'd been watching, though it had yielded little. The paranoia had taken root, and though she remained fully clothed, my thoughts undressed every layer of pretense. Was it possible she knew I was watching? Her behavior, careful and deliberate these past few days, seemed too synchronized with my growing doubts. At the dinner table, she no longer thumbed messages on her phone. Her laugh, once genuine and carefree, now came as if rehearsed, an echo of its former self. It was as if she were rewriting herself for my benefit, or more chillingly, as a disguise. The bedroom light dimmed briefly, and I shifted, craning to see better. Lily stood now, pacing as she spoke into the phone, her free hand brushing her hair absently. Was she nervous? Or was I projecting? My thoughts spiraled as she finally sat back down, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial hush. That's when I caught it, one word, whispered so casually, but it hit me like a train. Vibe? I knew no vibe. My heart thudded in my chest, each beat a question mark that refused to resolve. I forced myself to keep still, though every fiber of my being screamed at me to burst inside, to demand answers. Instead, I waited, holding my breath as she ended the call. She didn't hang up with the usual mechanical disinterest she reserved for telemarketers or automated reminders. No, this was tender, a soft goodbye meant for ears more deserving than mine. When I finally returned to the house, it was as though nothing had happened. She sat on the sofa now, scrolling her phone, her face calm and devoid of the tension I'd seen earlier. I pushed open the door deliberately, letting the cold air sweep in with me. Lily glanced up, her smile widening as she tucked her phone away. "You're back," she said, her tone warm and welcoming. "Yeah." I crossed the room slowly, my eyes on hers, looking for cracks in the facade. "What were you up to?" "Just a quiet evening." She shrugged and stretched, feigning innocence. "Dinner's in the oven." As I sat down, I heard it again. A faint whisper of her earlier call seemed to cling to the air like static. "Vibe, my husband is here." And I pretended I hadn't heard a thing. The air was stifling in the dining room, though the heater had been turned off hours ago. The aroma of roasted chicken filled the space, mingling with the faint tang of wine poured neatly into 2 glasses. I sat across from Lily, my mind a storm, though my face remained carefully blank. The soft clink of her fork against the plate was the only sound that dared break the silence. I hadn't said a word about what I'd overheard earlier, though the name Vibe ricocheted in my head like a bullet in a steel room. The quiet burned inside me like acid, and my thoughts churned violently, an ocean against an unyielding dam. Every logical part of me told me to be calm, to think this through, but every instinct screamed to demand answers, to pull the truth from her lips, whether she wanted to offer it or not. Instead, I tore into the meal, my knuckles white against the fork, forcing each bite down though I'd barely tasted it. Lily ate slowly, her expression serene, though there was a tautness in her shoulders. She was always good at keeping her composure, but tonight I could see the cracks, faint but present. A misplaced glance, the way her fingers lingered on her wine glass a moment too long. Details only a husband who had memorized her every move could spot. "How was work today?" she asked, her tone light, as though nothing was wrong. "Fine," I replied tersely, taking a sip of the wine. It was sour on my tongue. "And yours?" "Busy," she said with a soft sigh, leaning back in her chair. "You know how it is? End-of-year rush. Everyone needs something yesterday." I nodded mechanically. My gaze followed her every movement, dissecting the subtle shifts in her posture. Was she lying? Or was my paranoia painting her in colors she didn't deserve? The room fell into another stretch of silence. She seemed to notice it too, and quickly filled the void. "Did you hear from your brother today? I thought he might come by for dinner this weekend." I shrugged, swirling the wine in my glass. "He's busy. We talked about mundane things, the weather, plans for the weekend, even a recipe she wanted to try." But her voice was strained, the lightness forced. I knew it wasn't just me. She could feel it too, the weight of the unspoken hanging heavy over us. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I put my fork down, the sound sharp against the plate. "You know," I began, my voice quieter than I expected. "I've noticed something." She froze, her fork hovering in midair. "What do you mean?" I leaned forward, locking my eyes on hers. "I've noticed that you're hiding something from me." Her face changed immediately, a fleeting flash of panic before she caught herself. She blushed, a deep crimson that spread to her neck, but her voice came out steady. "I'm not hiding anything. You've been acting strange lately, Lily." My words were deliberate, cutting. "Is something wrong?" Her fingers curled around the edge of the table, knuckles pale. She shook her head quickly, too quickly. "No, nothing's wrong. I don't know what you're talking about." The dam broke. The rage that had been simmering beneath my skin boiled over. My fists slammed against the table, rattling the plates and glasses. "Answer me honestly. What are you doing, Lily?" She flinched at the sudden outburst, tears springing to her eyes. Her voice cracked as she replied, "I'm not cheating on you. I swear, I would never cheat on you." She pressed her hands to her face, her words muffled by sobs. "We've been together for almost 8 years. In 3 days, it'll be exactly 8 years. I would never even think of cheating on you. I love you, dear. I do. Please don't think that of me." Her tears soaked in her sleeves as she leaned over the table, trembling. For a moment, her words hit me harder than I expected. I stared at her, my chest heaving as the anger drained, replaced by a hollow uncertainty. What if she wasn't lying? What if my suspicions were nothing more than shadows of my own insecurities? The thought clutched at me, made me feel small. I ran a hand over my face, leaning back in my chair. "I'm sorry," I said finally, my voice rough. "I've just been so busy at work lately, and it's gotten to me. I'm tired, Lily. That's all. I didn't mean to." She sniffled, wiping her face with the sleeve of her sweater. "It's okay," she whispered, her voice breaking. "It happens. We've been under a lot of stress, I know." For a moment, the tension in the room lessened. I reached out and took her hand, squeezing it lightly. She smiled faintly, though her eyes remained damp and wary. As we cleared the table, I tried to convince myself that her words were true, that she wasn't hiding anything. But deep down, the unease lingered, festering like an untreated wound. I apologized. She forgave me, but nothing felt resolved. And in the quiet that followed, I couldn't stop hearing it. The name she thought I hadn't heard. Vibe. The bedroom was a cocoon of muted shadows, the faint orange glow of the streetlights filtering through the curtains. I lay there beside Lily, her steady breathing the only sound in the stillness. She slept with the peaceful ease of someone whose conscience was clear, her body curled into a soft curve beneath the blanket. But my mind refused the solace of sleep. The events of the evening replayed endlessly, each moment another brick in the heavy wall pressing down on my chest. Her tears, her trembling voice, the desperate sincerity in her words, they lingered, gnawing at the edges of my doubt. I turned over again, careful not to wake her, and stared at the ceiling. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was the villain here, letting my paranoia twist harmless coincidences into something sinister. The long hours at work, the stress, the constant feeling of being stretched thin, it all added up. I had convinced myself there was something wrong with Lily when, in truth, the cracks were in me. A knot formed in my throat as I resolved to fix things. I couldn't let my own insecurities tear apart what we had built over 8 years. She deserved better than a husband who doubted her love. The first light of dawn crept into the room as I finally let my eyes close, not to sleep but to plan. I wasn't going to work today. Instead, I'd stay home, make things right. When I woke again, the sun was already spilling through the windows, and Lily was still curled up next to me, her hair a tangle across the pillow. For a moment, I just watched her, a pang of guilt rising in my chest. I wanted to erase the hurt I'd caused, to let her know I trusted her completely. Slipping quietly out of bed, I headed to the kitchen. The house was silent save for the occasional creak of the floorboards beneath my feet. I rummaged through the pantry and fridge, gathering ingredients for breakfast. Eggs, toast, coffee. Simple, but enough to show her I was sorry. As the aroma of sizzling butter filled the kitchen, my mood lifted. I even hummed softly, something I hadn't done in ages. I plated the food carefully, arranging it neatly before pouring her a cup of coffee just the way she liked. 2 sugars, a splash of cream. Balancing the tray, I tiptoed back to the bedroom and set it on the nightstand. "Morning," I whispered, brushing a strand of hair from her face. She stirred, blinking sleepily. Her eyes landed on the tray, and a small smile tugged at her lips. "What's this?" "Breakfast in bed." I grinned, sitting beside her. "I owe you after last night." Her expression softened, and she sat up, tucking the blanket around herself. "You didn't have to do this." "I wanted to." I pressed a kiss to her temple. "I'm sorry, Lily. For everything." She shook her head gently. "It's okay. I know things have been hard lately." As she ate, we talked about nothing in particular, the weather, her plans for the day, the weekend ahead. Her laughter came more freely this morning, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. When she left for work, I kissed her goodbye at the door, watching as she walked down the path to her car. The morning sun caught the auburn in her hair, and for a moment, I let myself believe that things really would be okay. With the house now quiet and empty, I turned my attention to my next task, cleaning. It wasn't something I typically did. Lily always joked about my knack for avoiding the vacuum cleaner. But today was different. I wanted her to come home to something that showed her how much she meant to me. I started in the kitchen, scrubbing the counters until they gleamed. I swept and mopped the floors, marveling at how much dust could accumulate in a week. From there, I tackled the living room, wiping down surfaces, fluffing the couch cushions, even organizing the books on the shelves. By the time I made my way to the bedroom, the morning sun had given way to early afternoon. I changed the bed sheets, folding the old ones neatly before placing them in the hamper. As I moved to dust the nightstand, I noticed Lily's phone charger coiled neatly there. A memory of her softly murmured "Vibe" floated into my mind, unbidden. I shook it off, determined not to let my thoughts wander. Today was about making things right. I wasn't going to let doubts creep back in. The hours slipped by as I worked, the rhythm of cleaning soothing my restless mind. By the time I finished, the house looked as though it belonged in a magazine. I stood back to admire my work, a satisfied smile tugging at my lips. All that was left now was to wait for Lily to come home. The house sparkled with an unfamiliar cleanliness, a reflection of the guilt I'd been trying to scrub away all day. I'd spend hours cleaning every corner, fueled by the hope that my effort would make up for my misplaced accusations. Lily would come home to a spotless home and see how much I cared for her, how sorry I was for doubting her. Slumping onto the couch, I glanced at the clock. Still hours before she returned. My body ached from the unaccustomed labor, but I felt good, relieved almost. My eyes drifted toward the corner of the kitchen, where a bulging garbage bag sat in the bin. "Right, that needs to go." I groaned as I stood, dragging myself to the kitchen. The moment I grabbed the bag, I realized just how heavy it was. Grunting, I pulled it free from the bin, feeling its weight strain against the plastic. As I shuffled toward the door, the bag snagged on the edge of the counter. Rip! The bag split open with a wet, grotesque sound, and its contents spilled across the floor in a putrid heap. A wave of nauseating stench hit me so hard I staggered back, retching. My stomach heaved, and I barely made it to the sink before vomiting. I stood there for a moment, gripping the counter, breathing through my mouth to avoid the rancid odor. The mess on the floor was horrific. Food scraps, stained tissues, and other unrecognizable refuse lay in a slimy pile, oozing a foul liquid that made my eyes water. Crap, crap, crap. Grabbing another bag, I crouched down and began shoveling the mess into it as fast as I could, my hands covered in rubber gloves. Each scoop was a fresh assault on my senses. I gagged more than once, my throat burning as I fought to contain the bile rising in me. Then I saw it. Amidst the rotting food and sticky tissues lay a used condom. Its latex glistened under the harsh kitchen light, stark against the dark mess around it. For a moment, my brain refused to process what I was looking at. But then, the realization hit me like a freight train. My breath caught in my throat, my vision blurring. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it might tear through my chest. The world spun, the stench forgotten as rage and devastation surged through me. "You're cheating on me," I whispered hoarsely, the words barely audible over the blood rushing in my ears. Then, louder, "You're cheating on me, you stupid fool." The sound of my own voice startled me, raw and trembling with fury. I stood up abruptly, knocking over a chair. It clattered to the floor, but I didn't care. My chest heaved as I scanned the room, my fists clenching and unclenching, desperate for something to lash out at. I grabbed a glass from the counter and hurled it against the wall. It shattered into 1,000 tiny shards, a perfect reflection of the chaos inside me. I threw a dish next, then a jar from the pantry, each crash a release of the storm tearing through me. But even as I raged, a cold clarity began to creep in. Smashing plates wasn't going to fix this. It wasn't going to give me answers. I dropped to my knees, staring at the mess on the floor. The condom mocked me, its presence undeniable proof of Lily's betrayal. But who? Who had been here in my home with my wife? My mind raced, cycling through faces and names, all the people I could think of. None of it made sense. Lily had been so convincing last night. Her tears, her words. Had it all been a lie? Was she that good at deception? I clenched my jaw, my fury narrowing into a single, burning determination. I wasn't going to destroy the house in blind anger. Not yet. I needed to know. I needed to catch her. Whoever it was, they weren't going to slip through my fingers. Not after this. I stood slowly, my hands trembling, but my resolve firm. I'd wait. I'd watch. I'd find out exactly who was with my wife. And when I did, there would be no more questions. The house was immaculate again, though the memory of the chaos that had unfolded earlier still lingered like a phantom. I had scrubbed the floor twice, doused the room with air freshener, and tucked away every trace of the garbage incident, all while my stomach churned. It was as if erasing the physical mess would somehow ease the wreckage in my mind. By the time I collapsed onto the couch, the stench was gone, replaced with the artificial scent of lavender and lemon. But the real poison, the bitterness swelling in my chest, remained. I sat there, staring blankly at the muted TV screen, trying to force a plan into existence. Anything, but my thoughts circled the same dead-end questions. Who was it? When had this started? Had I been blind all along? No answers came. Only the crushing weight of humiliation and rage. When Lily finally walked through the door, her keys jingling as she set them on the table, her face lit up instantly. "Wow," she exclaimed, her eyes sweeping the living room. "The house looks amazing, and it smells so nice, like home." I froze for a moment, my lips pressed tightly together. The sharp chemical tang of cleaning products still hung faintly in the air. But to her, it was familiar and pleasant. I forced a smile, figured I'd make things nice for you. She leaned down to kiss my cheek, and I stiffened slightly, though she didn't seem to notice. "I really appreciate it," she said warmly. I grunted something vague and turned back to the TV. The smile lingered on her face as she moved toward the bedroom. Moments later, I heard the shower running. Long days? I called, keeping my tone neutral. Yeah, she replied over the sound of water. But seeing the house like this, it really brightened it up. Her voice carried that natural warmth I'd fallen in love with all those years ago. It sounded so real, so genuine. If I hadn't found that condom, I might have believed everything was fine. But I couldn't unsee it, couldn't silence the dark thoughts in my mind. We exchanged a few more pleasantries, but my words were automatic, hollow. I had to fight to keep my voice steady, to stop myself from snapping. There was no plan yet, and I needed to watch. For the next 2 days, I kept up the facade, letting her chatter about work and life while I nodded and pretended to care. My mind remained locked on the betrayal, replaying every moment that seemed suspicious, every detail that felt off. Each time she smiled, a fresh wave of nausea hit me. Tomorrow was our anniversary. 8 years. 8 years of shared laughter, of sacrifices, of building a life together. And now, I couldn't decide if it was all a lie or if it had only become one recently. Lily, on the other hand, was radiant with excitement. I can't wait for tomorrow, she said as we prepared dinner that evening. She wore her favorite apron, the one with a small tear in the corner. 8 years! Can you believe it? I stirred the pot of pasta sauce, my jaw tight. Yeah, I said shortly. She glanced at me, her brow furrowing slightly. You're not excited? I've just been tired lately, I replied, waving her off. Work's been a lot. Her face softened, and she reached over to touch my arm. I know, but it's a big day for us. I've been looking forward to it for weeks. I forced a smile. Yeah, big day. But there was no joy behind the words. I couldn't muster it. I didn't bother dressing up or planning a gift. Let her have her big day, I thought bitterly. Tomorrow wasn't going to be a celebration. It was going to be my reckoning. She hummed as she finished setting the table, completely oblivious to the storm brewing just beneath the surface. As I sat across from her, picking at my food, I made a silent vow. I'd watch her. I'd wait for her to slip, to give me something concrete. And when she did, I'd be ready. No more pretending. Tomorrow, the day of our anniversary, arrived with the weight of dread pressing against my chest. Lily woke up before me, her usual morning cheer as infectious as ever. She kissed my forehead, whispered, "Happy anniversary," and slipped out of bed. I stayed there a little longer, staring at the ceiling, wondering if the day would pass without my composure shattering. When I finally joined her in the kitchen, she greeted me with a radiant smile. 8 years, can you believe it? I forced a smile and muttered, "Happy anniversary." She tilted her head expectantly. So, where's my present? My heart clenched, but I kept my tone light. Later, I said with a grin, "It's a surprise." Her eyes lit up, and she nodded. "Okay, I'll wait." She handed me her gift, a pair of socks, neatly wrapped in cheerful paper. I didn't need to open it to know what it was. Every year, the same gift. The same soft wool, the same practicality. "Thanks," I said dryly, holding the package. "Nothing new, huh?" She laughed, brushing it off. "You love them, don't lie." I bit my tongue, my mind racing with the hypocrisy of it all. She was the one who was supposed to surprise me, to bring joy to this day. Instead, she had turned it into a cruel joke. The hours crawled by as she busied herself in the kitchen, humming softly as she prepared a feast. She was always on her phone, texting or talking in hushed tones, her fingers moving deftly over the screen. I pretended not to notice, though every buzz of her phone made my stomach twist. By the time the guests began arriving, the house was filled with the aroma of roasted meats and fresh-baked bread. My 3 best friends arrived first, greeting me with smiles and back slaps, their laughter echoing through the living room. Lily's friends followed, a small, chatty group that filled the house with their banter. And then he walked in. I froze as soon as I saw him. He was tall, with dark, confident eyes and an easy smile. His tailored suit clung to his broad frame, exuding wealth and charm in equal measure. It was him, the man I'd heard her whisper about, The man whose name had come up once or twice in passing, always with a casual air, as though he was just another acquaintance. Vibe. My breath caught in my throat as Lily's eyes lit up at the sight of him. She didn't just greet him, she floated to him, her face aglow with a joy I hadn't seen in weeks. I clenched my fists, forcing myself to stay rooted in place as she led him toward me. "This is my husband," she said brightly, gesturing toward me with a hand on his arm. "And this," she continued, looking at him with a smile that felt too warm, "is Farid. He's a close friend." "Pleasure to meet you," Farid said smoothly, extending a hand. I shook it reluctantly, his grip firm, his expression unreadable. "Likewise," I said through gritted teeth, pulling my hand away as quickly as decorum allowed. We exchanged a few polite words, where he was from, what he did, the usual small talk. He was Arab, wealthy and polished, his accent carrying a hint of sophistication. But I could barely focus on his words, too distracted by the way his eyes flicked toward Lily every few moments. And she? She hung on his every word, her laugh soft and genuine in a way that made my blood boil. Throughout the evening, I watched them like a hawk. Farid moved effortlessly through the room, charming everyone he spoke to, but his attention always returned to Lily. Whenever he leaned in to whisper something to her, she smiled or blushed, her hand brushing his arm as if by accident. I tried to stay calm, to keep my mask intact, but every whispered word between them was like a knife twisting deeper into my chest. My friends noticed my silence, shooting me curious glances, but I brushed off their concern with a forced grin and a joke about being tired. Inside, I was a storm. As the evening wore on, the tension in me built to an unbearable level. My mind raced with questions, my pulse pounding in my ears. What were they whispering about? How long had this been going on? And most importantly, was I the only one who saw it? But I held my tongue, determined not to let my anger boil over. Not yet. I would wait. I would watch. And when the moment came, I would uncover the truth, whatever it was. The evening buzzed with laughter and conversation, glasses clinking as my friends and hers mingled. For a moment, I managed to let my guard down, distracted by the friendly banter of my closest friends. I told myself I was imagining things, that Lily's warmth toward Farid was innocent, her laughter nothing more than politeness. But the moment I stopped paying attention, they vanished. It didn't hit me at first. I was in the middle of a conversation when I glanced around and realized she was gone. My chest tightened, and my eyes darted around the room. She wasn't at the bar, nor was she in the kitchen. I scanned every corner, my pulse quickening with every second. Then it hit me, the bedroom. Without thinking, I excused myself and walked briskly down the hallway, my heart hammering in my chest. The door was shut but not locked. I gripped the handle, threw it open, and there it was, the truth I'd dreaded yet expected all along. Lily was lying in our bed, her skin tangled in the sheets, her hair disheveled. And beside her, with the same smug confidence I'd seen all night, lay Farid. My vision blurred, my fury igniting like a match to dry tinder. "So, this is how you decided to celebrate our anniversary?" I roared, my voice echoing through the house. Lily scrambled out of bed, grabbing her clothes hastily. "It's not what it looks like," she stammered at first, her face a mask of guilt. But as she dressed, her expression hardened. "No, you know what?" she snapped, glaring at me. "I don't care anymore." I froze, stunned by the venom in her voice. "You're a loser," she continued, her voice rising. "You've never achieved anything. You think I'm happy with this life? With you? Compared to Farid, you're nothing. He's a real man, wealthy, successful. What are you?" Her words were daggers, each one sharper than the last. My rage turned cold. "Are you done?" I said quietly, my tone low and dangerous. By now, the commotion had drawn the guests. One by one, they gathered in the hallway, their faces a mixture of shock and disbelief as they pieced together what was happening. "How could you do this, Lily?" one of her friends gasped, her hands covering her mouth. "On your anniversary?" another muttered, shaking his head. The weight of their judgment seemed to roll off Lily like water. She crossed her arms, defiant. I don't care what any of you think. That was when I smiled, cold, cruel, and full of satisfaction. Do you remember the surprise I promised you, Lily? She blinked, momentarily caught off guard. I gestured to the corners of the room. Here it is. Her eyes followed my hand, widening as she spotted the small, discreet cameras mounted in the corners. They're everywhere, I said, my voice dripping with venom. Every word, every action recorded. Now the world will know exactly who you are. She lunged at me, screaming, her fist pounding against my chest. You can't do this. You can't. I stepped back, grabbing her wrists and forcing her away. Get out, I snarled. You and your lover. And the rest of you too. Everyone out. I don't want anyone here. The guests shuffled out awkwardly, some muttering apologies, others casting disgusted looks at Lily and Farid. As they left, I walked to the computer and retrieved the footage. With a few clicks, the video was uploaded to the internet. By the time the house was empty, I'd had enough. I packed my bags quickly, grabbing only what I needed. I didn't care about the house, the memories, or the life we'd built together. It was all tainted now. As I drove to my old country home, my phone buzzed repeatedly. I ignored it at first, but curiosity got the better of me. Lily had written, "You ruined my life. You ruined his life. You're a fool. You'll regret this. You'll feel terrible." I didn't reply. I didn't care. The country air was crisp and clean when I arrived, the house quiet and welcoming. It took time to adjust, to shake off the weight of what had happened. But within a month, I met someone new, a woman who was kind, genuine, and everything Lily was not. We built something real together, something untainted by lies or betrayal. For the first time in years, I was happy, truly happy. And as for Lily, I never looked back.